The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome. It's another edition of the Bill Clark Show. Coach Bill Clark, along with Landon Roberts, Molly Robinson. I'm Pat Smith. And Coach, the offseason is in full swing, but it does not ever fail. Whether we're doing our radio show or you pick up the newspaper, yes, Molly, there is a such thing as called a newspaper. It's something about NIL. And once again, just some crazy stories out there on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, I think one of the things we really want to do, capture on this show, not that you guys don't do this, but kind of the behind the scenes, the coach's perspective, maybe the real things that are happening out there. One of the things I was discussing with you guys just a minute ago is this: what is a contract? This was a question I asked last week to a friend of mine who's at a big-time program. I said, what does a contract really look like? And I know I've had some of my former coaches who are out there talking about you better make sure your collective understands to enforce a contract. We're hearing about how do you enforce things now. So there are those things that are in this contract that says we are paying you X amount for services, class attendance. And it's amazing that there are these attorneys, now not the good ones. We got those guys that represent pro agents. Why do these pro agents represent these guys? They're betting on the future, right? That this guy, and a lot of times they're not even hardly charging them. We're talking about a lot of these guys that are the shade tree attorney that's out there, the shade tree representative who is questioning things like class attendance. You're asking for money to be paid back. So we're starting to hear these things where a guy says he's going to leave because he's got people in his ear, and these institutions are saying, wait a second, you're going to have to pay that money back. So I think that's ending some of that. We've got a story coming out that just happened in this past month where a player was taken from one school to another, an SEC school to another SEC school. Public knowledge, I didn't know that there was a buyout in there. That there was an amount. The guy I was talking to said it's the first time he had heard this, that there was a buyout and the buyout was paid by this other institution.
Well, if you want to alleviate some of the murkiness, some of the skepticism, all the negative attitudes that come with NIL, and can't believe we're paying college athletes to go out there and play a game that used to just be so pure. And I know there's a shadiness of recruiting that used to go on. But now, if you were more transparent, especially now, and I know we'll get into it, but the state of Georgia is saying no income tax on NIL deals for student athletes. If Alabama follows suit, if you're going to get a break and mom and pop that are living paycheck to paycheck have to pay a sales tax, a state sales tax, or income tax, then I think that stuff should be public record. So let's be more transparent with some of the terms of these contracts. And maybe if you see the commitment and some of the guidelines that they have to follow to earn that money, and it's not just showing up on Saturdays, maybe that would help some of the criticism subside a bit. I don't know. You got people that hate it, that are continue to hate it.
Yep.
But if it was more out in the open, maybe people would start to grasp and maybe think of it in a different way.
I think all of us would be happy with that there are contracts. We just want to know kind of what those contracts look like. And I think the question I had from how good is your collective? And as I think about what would a collective of mine look like, I think there's got to be teeth from that collective, because the collectives are the ones that are going to enforce whether this student athlete fulfills what's in the contract. Does that make sense? So if you've got a collective of folks who don't feel like enforcing that contract, I think that's where you have problems. Is this paid one time? There's institutions that are out there that pay them monthly. I like that, because what is that about a monthly? Whether we're talking about class attendance, whether we're talking about practice, whether we're talking about all these things that we think are just normal understandings, and you've already made this payment, and then you're going to make another payment at the end of the semester. To me, that's where it seems like you would have a problem. If I went and looked at the people that are getting it right, that's what it would seem to me, that there's a monthly payment. The collective enforces the rules, which is good for everybody, in my opinion.
Well, moral conduct, too.
Yeah.
What do we hear from Georgia when they had a record number of players that got pulled over for excessive speeding, reckless driving, whatever the case, driving under the influence? And then we heard from Georgia and from Kirby Smart saying that it was going to start costing them money. How prevalent is that in some of these contracts from school to school, campus to campus, with having a moral code of conduct and some of the other things, not just class attendance?
Yeah, I think that to me is what I would want. Okay, if we're going to now turn this into a transactional deal. Today I had I hadn't even told you this, guys, off the air, but I had a really nice.
Juicy.
Yeah, this is not real juicy. This was just a really heartfelt tweet that was sent, not a tweet, but a video sent to me by a former player where he had some players come in. They had sent me some things about appreciation. It goes back to Prattville days. That's the things we got into this for, you know, and it really breaks my heart when I feel like we're getting away from some of that. But I do think put those things that are good for the player, such as going to class and, you know, I mean, these are things they put in these pro contracts, their weight and their strength and those things, but moral things as well that are going to be good for them, good for their future. So we're paying this guy, you know, X amount of money, but let's include the things that make them better as people and as teammates. And to me, you know, if Georgia's doing that or the people that are doing that, that's the people that get it.
Okay, I want you to be very honest with this answer. If you were coaching today and somebody walked in your office and said, hey, coach, I know I got an NIL deal, but you know what? I'm just tearing it up. I've got great numbers. I need to be paid more, and I'm not going to play until you get me more money. How would you handle that?
Yeah, I'd have a hard time with that, obviously. I think that's where communication, and I always talk about we believe in something, right? You know, and I think one of the things as you coach and you are in a leadership position, if this is what we believe in, being on time, protecting the team, no excuses, whatever that is, we preach it, and then you got to live it, you know. So I think, you know, and I was asking this same friend of mine, I said, well, how many times have you been approached about changing a contract or a deal? He said, you know, they might come to me 6 times. I said, 6 times during the season? Because here's what's happening. Remember I told, you know, our listeners this. The thing that I said over and over and over as this was starting, and I was, you know, a lot of us coaches, not all of us were involved. As we were hearing NIL was coming, it was the in the ear from these other opponents. And that's what's going on. Whether
The tampering.
Yeah. You know, that's what's killing us. And that's where you know, I mean, these guys don't even know for sure. It could change tomorrow. You know, I was with an attorney who deals with this the other day. I was with a player personnel director. You know, they don't even know what the future is. But, you know, does this house settlement, does it get where we've got some kind of commonality? Can that be upheld in court? I mean, because, you know, that's what's going to happen. You know, does it get challenged? I saw with the Power 4 are bringing in maybe a commissioner. You guys can tell me more than that. But I do think having a strong collective that's willing to uphold, you know, hey, I'm thinking about leaving. Well, you owe us for this money you've been paid. You know, if you're breaking a contract,
sure,
just like anywhere. So I think what's good for both sides, you know, and I had somebody stop me the other day, well, coach, you know, coaches get contracts. Well, okay. But then I have to fulfill that contract, and if I break it, then I've got a penalty.
You can't get on the phone with another school in the middle of the season unless you want them to void your contract, and 100%. Then you got other legal problems.
That's right. Which is where I guess we are. You know, is that these contracts have got to have teeth in them. I would include all kind of things. Now, granted, those are the things I hope that you're talking. And you know, we can even see this in the pro teams. Yes, they're getting paid, but there's a sense of team and community and family. That's what the good ones look like. I think there's ways to do that, but you do have to have good compliance and good structure of those contracts.
It's different now than it was for the bulk of your coaching career. NIL, all of these things. I know that nobody is bigger than the team. Get all of that. But if it is an issue contractually, and you just think about the best player that you ever had, and you don't have to name them, and how much they meant to that particular football team, and you knew we got to have Johnny on Friday or Saturday, it's the difference in us winning and losing because the guy behind him, he's a nice kid, but he couldn't play dead in the Cowboys show. Back then, if it was a disciplinary issue and he goes out and he gets arrested and it's front page of the news, well, you don't have much of a choice. You're going to have to sit him. But now, yeah, for the most part, he's been showing up to practice. He's been working hard. But as Pat said, now he's holding you over a barrel.
Right.
And he's saying, you've got to have me. I've got leverage. What are you doing, Coach Bill Clark? You're obviously having the conversation. You're not going to write him a check out of your pocket. Are you getting on the phone and saying, hey, we're going to have to get something done or Johnny's not going to play?
Yeah, you know, and I think that's what I'm trying to do right now is learn what that process looks like. But I think the communication that this is a first of the year and end of the year process, you're trying to eliminate those problems. And I think here's the problem. Once I open Pandora's box and I try and renegotiate a contract in the middle of the year, and maybe that's part of your standard, that, hey, we're going to evaluate this at these benchmarks. We're going to have a contract talk here, and then we're going to have another one based on who's starting. And I think there's ways to do those things based on, hey, everybody's getting X, and then you're getting based on, are you the starter? Are you the quarterback? So maybe there are some benchmarks created in there.
I got another question, and excuse my naivety, but if you're at a state institution, you've got a contract. Is that officially public record?
Yes.
That's public record. And all of those funds, they're technically, I guess, they're coming from the institution, but you've got private donors and boosters that are putting in where there's a collection, and that pool of money is going to distribute to pay you, to pay your staff, to pay for other things. Why not with NIL and having, if I'm donating to a collective and I'm giving a certain amount of money per month or per year, I want to be privy to that contract. What am I paying for? What is he going to be? I don't know why we don't have more transparency.
You would assume within the collective you would. I would assume that. And like I said, I am learning as we go. I had a really good lunch meeting the other day with an attorney. I had one with the player personnel. I'm going to do that next week. This is where I've got to, if nothing else for the good of the show, but I think just from my own knowledge, what's really going on. And I think very interesting, I saw this player personnel, and he was using NFL. What's the percentage paid to the quarterback at the best teams? Because you got to have something that says, what am I doing and how am I basing?
So basically, he had a ratio, and he was trying to equate it to the college game of what.
That's right.
What franchises equate to their franchise quarterback.
I thought that was very smart.
Very much so. Yeah.
They're doing it. We're doing it. How do we do that? Here's what we're giving the freshmen. Here's what we're giving the starters. And I think that's, to me. So the question now is, how much is the head coach involved? I mean, how much is the head coach involved, and how much is you see why a guy's getting $1.5 million as the player personnel guy, because the head coach is saying, Pat, boy, good luck down there when you go into that meeting.
Yeah.
I'm starting to hear more of that, so the head coach can be the coach. And I have to look at myself and go, for somebody who's involved in every aspect, I want to know everything that was going on. I want to know his GPA and who he's hanging out with.
Would that kill you right now?
It would be tough. I mean, but I think there's such a numbers deal. So you got this one side of it. You've got the whole, what is the going rate for blank, for the defensive end, as we were talking about the defensive end, just left Georgia and went to Missouri or whatever that, what's that rate? What else is out there? I'm also having to deal with this kid who's wanting to come back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and the question of, well, I just got a call from this other school. Well, first, that's illegal. Second, you have a contract. And I think some of that's because they get so much noise. There's so much social media noise. It's not true. I had a coach tell me last year, it's like, he had this one guy who really didn't have anything. Well, he's going around saying he had this offer. So he's having to fend off these other people on the team who are hearing this lie. Hey, Johnny, you don't even have an offer, because he was just wanting to fit in.
Yeah.
But now they're having to really answer it. So it's just the craziness of what they're dealing with. But you almost have to have somebody that's in this world of, I'm dealing with that. Secondly, who understands it? Who's out there watching the transfer portal, the line, the guys that are out there? Have you got their phone number? Hey, Landrum, I know you said so. What's his cell number?
Yeah.
What's the way to get up with him? So there's all kind of balls being juggled right now.
All right, as far as the coaching fraternity right now, just the people that you talk to in the industry, let's start with a group of 5.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the budgets. They didn't have the budgets before NIL.
Right.
They certainly are going to struggle. Let's just take the American Conference, because that was the last conference that you were involved with. What is the average, do you believe, for an NIL for football? I'm not asking for basketball or anything else. For football, what is a good NIL for one particular football program for the season?
Are we saying we're saying in the American?
In the American.
Now we're talking about average versus what
yeah,
I think the top teams are doing.
Right.
I would say the number that I was hearing in there was $2 million. If you could get,
And for point of reference, the word on the street that Ohio State spent north of $20 million.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're saying, so just think if, and I've told you all this before, the average of the Power Four is 14 to 16 million. I mean, that's what you're looking at. So imagine you're sitting here at an American school and you're happy to have 2 million, and they're sitting at 14 million. I mean, you got no chance to keep up with that. Now the top teams are, you got 2 or 3 sitting around 5. So you see why they're better than these others. And now you're sitting there, all these Power 4 teams are 14 to 16 million, with some of them getting close to 20 million.
It's such a fine line. How many of these coaches, and you probably, and we've probably seen it happening here in recent months, but how many of these coaches that have these contracts that go and restructure contract, whether it's deferred salary or I'm going to take a reduction in my salary.
Yeah.
Not because of a bad season. We're having success, but you've told me that the coffers are empty. It's got to come from somewhere. Mm-hmm. How many of these coaches are willing to take hundreds of $1,000s per year off of their personal deal, their income, and put it back? Because ultimately that's going to be the lifeblood of your program, and that's going to decide whether you're at school X for one season or for the next 10.
I think there's no doubt willing to do things, and I think we've seen it. I think you've really seen it in some guys that struggled, and they go fire their coordinators and then they take a pay cut, but they're making a lot of money. I mean, I'm going from 10 million down to 8. I mean, so
or they're pulling a Brian Kelly where he and his wife makes it sound like they're being benevolent and said, "Hey, whatever you raise, we will match it up to $1 million."
Sure, yeah,
and that's a way to keep the folks off of his
backside.
That's
and so. Granted, this is capitalism, and this is from a guy who was in the world of every second of every day, you're pressurized. Now, you chose this business. Nobody made you. We put a gun to your head, but it is 24/7. It is never ending. As a coach told me, I'm scared to look at my phone because it's a player saying, I need. Mm-hmm. And it has nothing to do with food or lodging or he's in trouble. It's all about trying to get more money out of him. So you see both sides of that. I get that. And, this was paid because this guy's the pressure and the demands, and you're really good at what you do. And in this brief period of time, because I can get real dumb the next year. That's somebody said, well, how are you doing? I'm good. Let's see. Right now. I'm right today, I'm good, So that world of the pressure and all the things that go with it, I think that earns a certain amount of money. But it's also funny for some of the guys that got under some pressure to be willing to give up some money for their players, going to their players. I'm like, heck yeah,
When NIL first began there, Coach, Pat and I would have this discussion on the show, and we were trying to project, what does this look like? Do we get a market correction? Do some of these numbers for certain positions in college football, do they continue to escalate? Or is there a market correction just depending on how many talented players are in the portal, what's the availability? And what we've seen is, no, there's not been a correction. If anything, there's been an inflation of these numbers, and it's just varying from position to position, where we talk to a guy who is on top of it, and he's talking to all of these kids, their agents, their pseudo-agents and coaches, and telling us that this past year, what was it, Pat? It was defensive line.
Yeah.
Defensive line. That was a premium, and it started even if you were a mid-tier guy at $500,000.
Well, you go back and let's look at the history of the game when Urban Meyer finally figured, he had been in the SEC and he goes to Ohio State and says, we don't get D-line. They had O-line. We want a little bit more speed, but he changed them up front. That was really a huge change. Of course, it's like what's hot. I mean, we'll go watch the Super Bowl and we'll say, okay, Philadelphia rushed 4 and dropped 7. They didn't blitz. That's the answer. So you'll see people, and it's like, no, that was the answer for the Chiefs for that game because Mahomes could pick up a blitz and he could see it, and it worked, and they had a great front four. So it's kind of like what's hot, what's out there, what's the latest. But to your question, I think that, and I said this probably since we started the show, there's never been a time where if a team wants to win, and I mean team is in the community, they can do something.
In regards to, and you were talking about the $2 million on average for an American football conference team. This is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for Ohio State. Ohio State ran a deficit last year in their athletic department, okay?
But they got a natty.
But they got a national championship. every athletic department and official that runs an athletic department, they will tell you this is not sustainable.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like we can go all in right now, but like if our fan base believes that there's Fort Knox underneath our athletic department, that's not real.
Right.
That can't happen. And I've heard Greg Byrne talk about it. I've heard other athletic directors. For the life of me, I just don't understand how a Jacksonville State, a Troy, a South Alabama, or a UAB can survive in the world that we currently live in without some type of correction.
Yeah, I think two things need to happen. Number one, that's where leadership comes in, and I think that's been the problem. The lack of leadership that let us get to this spot is sickening. I mean, to see it come and say, hey, let's compensate our guys. Let's put up guardrails. Let's create contracts. Let's compensate them. Great, compensate them. And as I said, to eliminate the tampering, to eliminate the crap that's going on through the year, maybe we will get some leadership. And I would love to see us get somebody who's looking over the whole thing if it's the right person that could help with that. So I think that's a great idea. Number two, and I've said this so many times because I've lived in these communities where when we finally decided we were going to start investing in the program. So those programs out there that are doing it, I mean, I can't blame them because what it does for the community, what it does for the school, the pride, because I've been part of that when it was horrible and you couldn't find anybody wearing your colors if they even knew what they were, to the change, And so my idea would to get everybody involved, but at the same time, parameters for these guys that are understood, to your point, transparent, where we are paying you good, but there's rules that go with that. And I think that's where we would all like to see it.
And there's both sides of the transparency, because if I'm going to take off the radio show headset, and I'm thinking as a college football fan, and we all grew up college football fans in the state, but ignorance is bliss. So even when you assumed that certain players back then were probably getting a duffel bag full of cash, or there was some kind of deal that was tied into them signing with a school, you could assume it, you couldn't prove it, and you could enjoy watching 3 hours of football on a Saturday. I think now with all of this extra that surrounds it, it's toxic. There's very little positive that is coming out of intercollegiate athletics, not just college football. When is it going to get to the point for the people that are buying the jerseys, buying the tickets, giving to your collective, getting their fannies and in their cars on Saturday mornings and making the trips with their families and dedicating a lot of money and a lot of time to go and watch this? When do they say we've had enough?
Yeah, I don't know. That's why I kept saying this years ago. We got to do something so we don't lose the greatest game there is, the greatest sport there is. And there's a lot of great sports, and there's a lot of sports to be proud of. As a guy who played a lot of sports, and you guys same way and loving sports, but college football in general, but college football, which trickles down to the high school level, so great, so meaningful. I just hope we can find a way to do that, and hopefully we get some leadership that can help us with that.
Yeah, that's what it's going to take. This is the Bill Clark Show here on Jocks 94.5. And, Coach, we've been talking about trying to get smarter when it comes to college football and running it. And they need to stop by SmartBank because maybe they can give those guys some ideas of how to better the game.
Yeah, they really can. SmartBank, I had a guy tell me the other day, man, what am I hearing about SmartBank? These guys were guys at another institution who came over, started in Tennessee in Sevierville. Now we've got them, Alabama, we got Auburn and Montgomery and Mobile and Birmingham and Tuscaloosa. So we got locations everywhere. These are people you can get to when you need them. They're going to know who you are. Check them out, and I think you're going to be very happy.
I would love to have seen Landrum Roberts go into Coach Clark's office and say, what, Coach? I am the best long snapper on this football team, and you need me.
You need me.
And I know I've got a deal that I can get all the free hot dogs I want, but you know what? I need more. I would like to love.
Throw some chips in.
I'd love to see Coach negotiate.
Coach, enjoy 4th and 25 from your own 30. Enjoy that.
So go for 2 and don't punt.
That's right.
There we go.
There you go. That would be a new story.
That would be a new story, yes.
Ever.
We could add that.
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for some of the early conversations when a guy goes into Nick Saban's office.
I can tell you guys, and I've mentioned it before, the thing that flabbergasted me, Coach, and you can either confirm nor deny, or you can laugh and tell
Just
me
laugh
later.
and we'll know that you're confirming.
Yes. That literally before the team left Tuscaloosa to go play in the college football semifinal at the Rose Bowl, there were multiple players that had a conversation with either their position coach or the head coach about renegotiating their NIL deal before they would get on a plane and fly to Pasadena.
I have not heard that, truly.
Well, I tell you
Now, I've
what.
heard a lot of stuff afterwards.
Now, if I was dealing with Bill Clark or Nick Saban, I would definitely go through position coach, maybe even potentially float it to GA first.
Now, guys, I'll tell you, without that, the number of things that were handled from a position coach, a strength coach, minus before the money, was incredible.
Well, yeah, I can,
So-
and listen. I mean, you coach big time football. I've known players that have played for both Alabama and Auburn, and it was absolutely when they had issues, whether it was with a girlfriend, whether it was with school, whether it was them not getting enough playing time or them being homesick, whatever it was, the strength and conditioning coach, because they spent the most time
Yeah.
with them in the off season.
He's a counselor.
Yeah.
yeah. He's a psychologist.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Scott Cochran, he was invaluable at the University of Alabama.
Well, I had Lyle Henley with me for
Yeah.
years, and Trent was very, very, very lucky to have kept him.
Congratulations to Coach Henley, too.
Yeah, congratulations to him. But before him, Zach Woodfin. But yes, that has been going on. The holding somebody for ransom. And I've had some players try to do that for me pre-money, so I know what's going on now with.
So how did you handle it?
Yeah, I had
Did you let the position coach take care of it, or
anything that could be handled before it got to me. Now, when you've got a wide open door policy, mine would usually be, now, have you talked to your position coach yet? And it was, I have, and he's told me to come on to see you. And usually I already knew about it.
Right.
Sometimes there was things that happened with some of those other girlfriend or whatever those things were. I had some guys say, hey, I want a red shirt. I've played my 4 games because I want to keep playing for you. I want to play with this quarterback. Or other things, some nefarious things. I'm thinking about transfer. Didn't have many of those because we preach team so much. But that had to happen. I had to make some choices. A couple times I just said, okay, I guess you're out. We had to move on.
Yeah.
And, so I think those are decisions. But when you get multiple guys in the world we're in now, it's really tough.
And we got plenty of shows that we can get into this, but I want some of the Bill Clark stories, some of the dumbest things that anybody ever brought to you where you're looking and before you can explode and blow your top, you're just like, you know what, bless his heart.
Yeah, that was daily. That was daily.
What did you just ask me?
Oh, my goodness. I think that's
and it
the
wasn't
point.
just players.
Right. I think that, yeah, plenty of those with administrators. But, I think we can't lose sight, and that's what I've said about this. I get from my former players today about what we meant to them, what our staff meant to them, and who the men they are today, all the reasons we got into it. Gosh, I hope we're not losing all that. That's what I'm worried about.
All right, Coach. Buffalo Rock, Dr. Pepper, they bring this program each and every week to our great audience. And I know Jimmy Lee and those folks just do a fantastic job.
Yeah, we couldn't have a show without the guys at Dr. Pepper and what they believe with college football. And then, of course, Jimmy Lee, Buffalo Rock, so philanthropic in our community. We appreciate those guys
And Jimmy,
so
you
much.
got a great product. I appreciate it.
That's
right.
I'm down about 6 of these a day.
Yeah, I can attest to that. Absolutely. Also, Coach, want to bring up the fact that Donahue Chevrolet, that Tahoe of yours, man, you might need to take it to a car wash.
Yeah, every once in a while I need to do that.
Thank you for saying that.
I know,
thank
it's
y'all.
just
I
very
don't-
troublesome.
That's really not true because I do keep it clean. But Chris Donahue, the guys over at Donahue Chevrolet, and really they've got all kind of brands, but I know we're specific Donahue Chevrolet, but appreciate those guys. And, they're really going to work with you. I bought multiple vehicles from them. Also, they took care of all our coaches at UAB. So Chris played at UAB, so I know he's got a love for that program.
Well, we appreciate you tuning in each and every Thursday night here on Jocks 94.5, watching us on YouTube as well. You can tell it's the off season, but these are just fascinating programs because we dove into NIL, and of course, in the coming weeks, there's no telling what kind of road we'll go down as Coach kind of leads me in the gang down some interesting waters.
Biggest cheaters in college football. Bill Clark will have those for us
Wow,
next
he's
week.
going to name names? Is that what Coach is going to do?
I don't know.
Are you going to name names?
You'll just have to check us out and say.
That's a great tease, Coach. For all of us involved at the Coach Bill Clark Show, thanks for Dr. Pepper and Buffalo Rock. From Molly, Landrum, I'm Pat. Coach Bill Clark, have a great week.
This has been the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.